Karen Reed, cop killer, or cop girlfriend? Well, today, we're going to cover a fascinating mystery with enough twists and turns, well, it makes you think you're on a Smoky Mountain ride through the hills of Tennessee. All those curves. We're going to be talking about the Karen Reed story. This and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crimebuster, charliecrimebuster.com, and peacemakernetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the Karen Reed story, and I've looked forward to covering this story for some time. You see, it's one of those stories at the very first looks very simple, very straightforward. That is until you pull the first thread, and then it all unravels. Hey, friend, you're going to love this series. But first, let me take time to welcome you to the podcast. Every week we have new listeners to the podcast, and we want to thank you for joining the Charlie Crime train. But my friend, that deserves a not so formal welcome. That's right, not so formal. So let me urge you to, if you're new to the Charlie Crime train, that is, reach out with a shout out. Yep, reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Tell us where you're listening from. Hey, you can also reach out even if you're a seasoned listener. And all of you can just say hi. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions about future podcasts. Or you can even lodge your objection. In other words, you can disagree with what we say. We always say here at Charlie Crimebuster, at charliecrimebuster Gmail, well, it is a safe place. And by the way, if you'd like to support the program, let me encourage you to go on over to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. You can join us as we support the brave men and women who always run toward danger, not away from danger. We're talking about first responders. We're talking about law enforcement. Yep, and we're talking about the military. These brave men and women who deserve our respect and honor. And by the way, if you'd like to get caught up on another series or other crime stories, true crime stories, well, just go right on over to charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com. You'll find all kinds of series there. We've just completed a series on, well, the shooting of Donald J. Trump, the assassination, the attempted killing of Donald J. Trump. We just finished that series. I think you will enjoy that. You can find all about it there at charliecrimebuster.com. And don't forget, every week, James and I, we have what we call Charlie Crime Talk. We sit down and we talk about the episode of the week that we've just dropped. In other words, we'll be talking about this episode. We'll throw in a few more new things for you, and we'll chat about what we're talking about today. You can find that at our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, and then go ahead and just tag it Charlie Crimebuster. YouTube at Charlie Crimebuster. And you'll find a whole group of Charlie Crime Talk episodes right there. All right, let's get to our focus today. Hey, hang on to your seat on the Charlie Crime train, because this ride will indeed get bumpy as we travel through these curves. Now, Karen Reed, she was the girlfriend of a Boston police officer. His name, John O'Keefe. She, Karen, is a financial advisor, even a professor. But this financial advisor and this cop, on the night of January the 28th, 2022, they were out partying. They went partying with some of O'Keefe's friends and some of the wives. You see, it's not uncommon for cops to hang out with other cops. By the way, we all seem to flock together with those who experience the same things, don't we? And it's very, very true with cops. You see, there's not too many people you can talk to about the job. They just don't understand unless they're on the job. Now, I say partying because one thing is very clear. In this story that some things aren't so clear, there's one thing that's very clear. And that is that all of those folks seem to really like to drink. Because most of those in this story, they got very intoxicated. And as in a lot of these parties, there sometimes is an after party. And this after party was held at the home of Sergeant Brian Albert. Sergeant Brian Albert, he was a police sergeant detective. He worked with O'Keefe at the Boston Police Department. So Karen, she's driving O'Keefe and herself back to the Alberts' home. Now hang on. This is where it gets very tricky. And this is where the mystery begins. You see, prosecutors in the case, they say that, well, she backed into him, ran over him, killed him outside of Brian Albert's home. But no, not so, says the defense. The defense? They say she dropped him off. He went inside the home, and he was killed either by Brian Albert's dog or one of the Alberts' relatives. Now, hang on to those thoughts, because there's a little more that meets the mind on down the road in this story. And so, as it often happens in these types of stories, it's not until the next day when the proverbial, well, I'll just say stuff hits the fan. Yep, she woke up. She was at O'Keefe's place, woke up around 5 a.m., and noticed that O'Keefe wasn't there. Hey, why didn't he come home? So, as the story goes, she began to frantically call some of the other women that had been with him the night before. She tells them Brian did not arrive home last night. And, of course, when you drink yourself into oblivion, she also stated she did not have good memory of the night before. Something interesting here, though. It was reported that she was worried that something might have happened to him. Oops. Is that unconscious guilt, or is that just plain old concern? Well, together, they all go out and they start looking for him. And when they arrive outside of the home of Brian Albert, where that after party was, they find John O'Keefe's cold body covered with about 6 inches of snow. Now, Karen, she lies on top of him. She attempts CPR. Paramedics are called. And as they arrive, she said to some, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" That's according to some people. Now, soon afterwards, Karen, she's brought to the hospital. And there, as in the course of the investigation, they draw her blood. And she has a BAC of 0.08. Now, think about this. The next morning, she still has a BAC of 0.08. Think what it might have been when she was driving away from the Albert home around 12:30 or so. I would say it would be at least 0.15 or 30, somewhere in there, don't you think? Now, also, investigators also find pieces of what they think is taillight in the snow and in his shirt. So immediately, you and I, well, we think it's all over, right? Simple, right? She dropped him off, and she backed into him, either by accident or her own intention. After all, she had wondered when paramedics arrived, did I hit him? Well, it all looks like a slam dunk, doesn't it? But you know, your old friend Charlie here, I would not bring this case to you if it was really all that simple. Oh, there is so much more to this story, and we're going to get right to it in a moment. But right now, it's time for what we call the Charlie Crimebuster Crazy Crook Story of the Week. You see, we always tell a crazy crook story to kind of lighten the load of some of the dark stuff we cover. So here, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, our story today comes from the good state of Kentucky. And Kentucky, like all the other Appalachian states, well, they've had to deal with a whole lot of meth when it comes to battling drugs. Now, meth is highly addictive. Oh, and it does terrible, terrible, terrible damage to your body. Just find somebody that looks like a meth head, and you will know what I'm talking about. You see, if you do meth, my friend, I'm going to tell you it's going to be real easy for you to land on Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook roster. And today, sure enough, David Ratliff, 43 years of age, he appears to have ignored the warning not to get messed up with meth. You could say meth and replace it with mess, because you will become a mess if you get mixed up with meth. Now, as a street cop, I cannot tell you how many times I found myself walking up on a suspicious vehicle parked alongside of the road or in a parking lot, with a person usually passed out in the seat. Now, upon occasion, it could just be a weary traveler, wanted to pull over and get some shut-eye, didn't want to drive while drowsy. Don't do that, don't drive drowsy. Don't drive drunk, don't drive drowsy. Yet more and often than not, the police in the popo world, in our world, we many times found that many other things were afoot. And so as the police approached David Ratliff, passed out or asleep in his vehicle, which was parked in the front parking lot of a video store that is on U.S. Route 421 in Manchester, which is about 100 miles south of Lexington, Kentucky. Well, they asked him for his ID. Now, at this point, unbeknown to our crazy crook, he made the job for police so much more easy and so much more simple. They did not have to search or even question him, because instead of handing them his ID, he mistakenly reached down and pulled out a bag of meth pills and a whole wad of money. Yep, you know the rest. The Clay County Sheriff's Office, well, promptly they arrested him for trafficking in a controlled substance. And yes, you bet, they confiscated that wad of money as well. So this crazy crook, who just handed over the drugs and the money, thinking it was his ID, well, this crazy crook, David Ratliff, does indeed become Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to our main focus. Let's talk about the cast of this real-life drama. The victim? John O'Keefe III. His nickname was JJ, or Johnny. He was born December the 8th, 1975. Grew up in Braintree, Massachusetts. And he graduated from the Braintree High School. And also from Northeastern University. And listen to this. He actually earned a master's degree in criminal justice from UMass Lowell. He lived in Canton since 2014. Where there he was raising his niece and nephew, following his sister's and brother-in-law's death. Now O'Keefe, he was a 16-year veteran of Boston PD. Now history also tells us that John O'Keefe's former partner, Pat Rogers, he's now deceased, but well, if you think about that name, you may know it because he was featured on the reality TV show Boston's Finest. And John O'Keefe's former partner, the deceased Pat Rogers, he was indeed known by many people. Now, John's brother, Paul, who was a witness for the Commonwealth, was also captain and quarterback of the Stonehill College football team. And he was teammates, and listen to this because you're going to hear this name again, with Lieutenant Brian Tully. Now, Brian Tully was Michael Proctor's supervisor at the Norfolk County District Attorney in the Massachusetts State Police Investigation Unit. I'm telling you this because these names will mean something on down in the investigation. Remember that name, especially Michael Proctor. It will come up again in this story. Now, the takeaway from this history is simply this. All these people involved in this were a very close bunch. And never forget this, my friend. And I say this with experience. Cops will always close ranks to protect each other. It has and always will be true. When you're out on the street, you get close to those people who have your back and will risk their own lives to save you in a dangerous job. It's only human nature to draw close to those people. Even the Bible says that there's no greater love. It says there's no greater love than when a man lays down his life for another. When you have that great love, people who are willing to lay down their life for yours, people who are willing to put themselves in danger for you, you will have great loyalty. Whether right or wrong, it's simple a fact, my friend. Just like gravity. Now, I may not believe in gravity, but I still can't jump 100 feet in the air. Because you see, gravity, it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. It doesn't matter whether I believe in it or not. I can say I don't believe in gravity, but I still can't jump 100 feet in the air. It's just a fact. And my friend, I want you to know it is just a fact. Cops will always close ranks. Sometimes that's good because you need to hang together or you're going to hang separate. And sometimes it's bad because sometimes you cover up bad activity. So, this is a group of cops, and they do close ranks, but we can't say whether they're closing ranks over truth or whether they're covering something up. That's yet to be seen in this investigation. Now, let's get to know Karen a little better. Karen Reed. She was born in 1980, so you see there's 5 years difference in the age there. She also grew up in Massachusetts and also in Blacksburg, Virginia. She graduated from Coyle and Cassidy. That's a private Catholic school in Massachusetts. She went to Bentley University, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in finance. And she had been a financial analyst there at Fidelity Investments since 2007. She was also an adjunct professor at Bentley University. Now, Reed, she lived in Mansfield at the time of O'Keefe's death. And O'Keefe and Reed, they began dating, back in 2020. Now, let's go and get a little background about this home where this alleged incident took place. It was the home of Albert, of course, and he was the owner of the Canton home outside of which O'Keefe would be found dead. Now, Albert, he is a retired Boston police sergeant. He was assigned to the BPD fugitive unit. That is all the way up until his retirement back in September the 4th, last year, 2023. By the way, he was also featured on the 2013 reality television series, again, Boston's Finest. Now, Albert's brothers, is Chris Albert, who lives on Canton Street, and he owns a pizzeria there in Canton. And Kevin Albert, who was another police officer. He served with the Canton Police Department as a detective. Now, something interesting about Kevin. In June 2024, Kevin, he was suspended from the police pending an internal investigation. And that was based on phone text conversations with, and here's that name again, Michael Proctor. That became public record during the cross-examination of Michael Proctor's testimony in the trial about this case. You see, Kevin was alleged by Proctor's text conversation to have lost his badge and gun while on duty. Again, after, surprise, 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 after a night out drinking while on duty working a cold case on Cape Cod. Remember I talked about police officers closing rank? Michael Proctor's was there helping Kevin out, it appeared. Now, Chris and his wife Julie and their son Colin, they were neighbors with the O'Keefes. Now, the Albert family were also longtime friends with Michael Proctor, who was the lead investigator on this case. So, again, is there reason to be suspicious of the closing ranks? Did that take place in this case? Some believe it did, and there is much, much more, some people believe, than a simple hit and run. But let's get back to that very night in question. On the night of January the 28th, 2022, O'Keefe Reed, they visited two bars in Canton, brother. It was C.F. McCarthy's and Waterfall Ball and Grill. Now, it was at the second bar that they met up with several acquaintances, including fellow police officer, again, Brian Albert. Now, shortly after midnight, Albert, he invited a whole group of people, including the couple, back to his home on Fairview Road there in Canton. Now, the two drove to the home in Reed's SUV. Now, Reed, she claims that she dropped O'Keefe off in front of the home and left because she wasn't feeling well. That morning, though, a snowstorm hit Canton on the morning of January the 29th. And Reed, of course, reported that when she woke up the next day, O'Keefe had not returned home. Now, after he did not respond to call or text, she contacted an acquaintance from that night, and listen to this name, very important name, Jennifer McCabe. And Jennifer McCabe agreed to join her and another woman by the name of Carrie Roberts in looking for him, in looking for O'Keefe, that is. The three women, they returned to Fairview Road there in Roberts' vehicle, and that's when they saw O'Keefe lying unresponsive in the snow. Reed, she got out of the car, began CPR. McCabe, she was the one who called 911. That was approximately 6:04 a.m. Canton Police, Fire, and EMS all responded to the scene. Now, O'Keefe, he was transported to the Good Samaritan Hospital there in Brockton, where he was pronounced dead. Now, a medical examiner, and this is very important in the case, later reported that O'Keefe, listen to this, had abrasions to his right arm, several lacerations to his face, 2 black eyes, skull fractures, which would have contributed to brain bleeding. They also determined that, of course, being out there, hypothermia, was a contributing factor in O'Keefe's death. Now, Reed, she says that O'Keefe was beaten inside the home, that his body was then left outside. However, there are 11 witnesses that say O'Keefe never entered the home. So you get where we're going with this? We got 2 different sides here. Prosecutor says, well, she backed into him, she killed him. Not so, says the defense. Nope, something crazy went on. Now, add to that, Trooper Michael Proctor. Remember that name? Yep. Michael Proctor of the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit, he was the lead investigator for this case. Remember, he's friends of all those cops. He did produce a series of written reports. He gave those to Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully of Massachusetts State Police. Now, according to the police, a cocktail glass and patches of blood were found alongside O'Keefe's body. Cocktail glass, patches of blood. They also found pieces of a broken taillight that they said matched a broken light on Reed's car. And Reed, she was arrested February the 1st, 2022. Her phone was taken into custody. Now, Reed was charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a collision there on February the 2nd, 2022. Now, in April 2023, Reed's attorneys, well, they presented a theory that actually implicated Brian Albert, who owned that home outside of which where O'Keefe was found dead. And they also implicated his sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe. Remember? She was the one who helped find the body. She had been drinking with Reed and O'Keefe on January the 28th. She actually helped Reed find O'Keefe's body that morning, if you remember. Now, get this, too. This is kind of strange. Think about this. Evidence showed that Brian Albert sold his house and got rid of the dog just right after the incident. And Jennifer McCabe, hold on to this, made a Google search way before his body was found, made a Google search at 2:27 a.m., how long to die in code. Did you get that? How long to die in code. And in November 2023, the residents of Canton, they actually voted to mount an independent investigation of the town's police department. Is there something going on in that police department? Now remember, there were 11 witnesses said that O'Keefe did not attend the party. But think about this. Richard Green, a forensic expert, he testified that O'Keefe's, his Apple Health data on his Apple Watch. Remember, we always say here on Charlie Crimebuster, we always leave a digital footprint. Well, his watch stated that he traveled 87.4 meters and took 80 steps between 12:21 a.m. and 12:24 a.m. And that he was on, get this, listen, 3 flights of stairs between 12:22 and 12:24 a.m. And remember, Jen's Google search did in fact happen at 2:27 a.m. So I guess I'm saying if he was walking around like that, if he was on 3 flights of stairs, does that mean she simply backed into him and hit him and killed him? Or was something else going on? You see, that does not support the theory that he was instantly hit and left for dead by Karen Reed, or does it? And then get this, Fran Sheridan, retired forensic pathologist. He says that O'Keefe's injury, that they were consistent with a physical altercation, not a vehicle collision. And Dr. Mary Russell, another retired emergency room physician and a forensic pathologist, she said the injury on O'Keefe's arms, wow, listen to this, was consistent with dog bites. Oh, so the mystery goes on, doesn't it? Yet sometimes the answer is just a simple answer. Busted taillight, glass found in O'Keefe's clothes, similar to the taillight. But what say ye? What say ye? So the mystery goes on. Well, the ride on Charlie's crime train, my friend, is just getting started, and we have a lots more. You see, this case actually went to trial. You may or may not know the results. If you don't already know the results, don't peek now, don't peek. Take the ride with us. If you do, then still take the ride, because I'm going to point out some things that were not covered in the trial in the days ahead. And I will. At the conclusion of this series, I'm going to tell you what I think really happened, what really happened to O'Keefe. So let me ask you, was it simply a hit and run? An accidental death? Or murder? What say ye? Hey, again, reach out with a shout-out. Reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Tell me what you think happened that night. If you have questions, ask them. Got suggestions, make them. If you wanted to make some objections, lodge them. Just reach out with a shout-out. charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. And don't forget, we're going to be talking about this particular episode this week on our YouTube channel, YouTube at Charlie Crimebuster. James and I will discuss this podcast. We'll give you some new things to think about as we think about part 2 coming up next week, as we continue to talk about Karen Reed. Cop murder or cop girlfriend? So, my friend, until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.